He laughed, tossing $100 bill at her apron like she was nothing more than a vending machine. "Go on," the billionaire sneered, swirling his 50-year-old scotch. "Entertain us. If you had my portfolio, where would you put the money? Cosmetics? Groceries?" The entire table of Wall Street sharks erupted in laughter. They saw a waitress. They saw a nobody. But when she finally opened her mouth, the laughter died instantly. She didn't just give advice. She dismantled his entire empire in 3 sentences. Julian Thorne thought he was playing a game, but he had just met the woman who would own him. The air inside the gilded cage, Manhattan's most exclusive rooftop lounge, smelled of old leather, Cuban cigars, and arrogance. It was a smell Elena Vance knew well, though she wasn't supposed to. Tonight, she was just the help. She was invisible, a ghost in a black waistcoat and starched white shirt, navigating the labyrinth of mahogany tables with a silver tray balanced on her fingertips. "More scotch, sweetheart, and try not to look so miserable. You're in the presence of greatness," a man's voice slurred. Elena didn't flinch. She kept her eyes lowered, pouring the amber liquid into the crystal glass with the precision of a surgeon. "Of course, sir. My apologies." The man was Braden Cole, a hedge fund manager who had made headlines last week for a sketchy merger. But he wasn't the sun around which this table orbited. That title belonged to the man sitting at the head of the booth, Julian Thorne. Julian Thorne was 32, possessed a jawline that could cut glass, and was the CEO of Thorne Capital. He was currently worth $4.2 billion. He sat with a relaxed, predatory grace, his jacket discarded, sleeves rolled up to reveal a Patek Philippe watch that cost more than Elena's childhood home. He wasn't loud like Braden. He was quiet, calculating, and infinitely more dangerous. "Braden, leave the girl alone," Julian said, though his eyes didn't leave the tablet screen in front of him. "You're drunk." "I'm celebrating, Julian. Vanguard Logistics is going to skyrocket tomorrow morning. I'm dumping $30 million into it at opening bell," Braden boasted, slamming his hand on the table. "It's a sure thing. Logistics is the future." Elena felt a physical jolt in her chest. Vanguard Logistics. The name triggered a cascade of data in her mind, memories of spreadsheets, 10K filings, and supply chain audits. She bit the inside of her cheek so hard she tasted copper. "Don't speak. You need this job. You need the tips for your father's surgery." She turned to leave, but Braden wasn't done. He grabbed the edge of her apron, yanking her back. The tray in her hand wobbled dangerously. "Whoa there," Braden laughed. "Where you going? We're talking big business here. Maybe you could learn something so you don't have to wipe tables for the rest of your life." The table erupted in chuckles. There were 5 of them, masters of the universe, kings of New York, and she was just the scenery. Julian finally looked up. His eyes were a piercing, icy blue, devoid of warmth. He looked at Braden's hand on her apron, then up at Elena's face. For a second, Elena thought he might defend her. Instead, a cruel, bored smile played on his lips. He was entertained. "Actually, Braden has a point," Julian drawled, his voice smooth as velvet. He leaned back, crossing his arms. "We're in an echo chamber, gentlemen. Maybe we need a fresh perspective, the perspective of the common man or woman." Julian reached into his pocket, pulled out a crisp $100 bill, and flicked it onto the table. It spun and landed near a half-eaten plate of oysters. "Tell you what," Julian said, locking eyes with Elena. "I'm feeling generous. You give us a stock pick. Or tell me what you think of Braden's Vanguard Logistics play. If you can string a coherent sentence together, the 100 is yours. If you make me laugh, I'll add another 0. The humiliation burned hot under Elena's skin. It wasn't the first time she'd been mocked by men like this, but Julian Thorne's indifference hurt more than Braden's aggression. To him, she was a toy, a court jester. "I have tables to serve, sir," Elena said quietly, trying to pull away. "Sit," Julian commanded. It wasn't a shout, but the authority in his voice was absolute. He gestured to the empty chair next to him. "Humor me. Braden says Vanguard is a buy. What does the waitress say?" The restaurant manager, a nervous man named Mr. Henderson, noticed the commotion and started rushing over, looking terrified. If Elena offended Julian Thorne, the restaurant could lose its biggest client. Elena looked at Mr. Henderson, then back at Julian. She looked at the $100 bill. Then she looked at Braden, who was grinning like a shark. Something inside her snapped. It was the fatigue. It was the hospital bills piling up on her kitchen counter. It was the fact that she had graduated top of her class at Wharton, only to be blacklisted by a man very similar to the one sitting at this table. She set the silver tray down on the table with a deliberate clack. The sound cut through the laughter. She didn't sit. She stood over Julian, her posture shifting from subservient to commanding in a heartbeat. She smoothed her apron, took a breath, and looked directly into Julian's ice-blue eyes. "You want to know about Vanguard Logistics?" Elena asked. Her voice wasn't quiet anymore. It was steady, cold, and professional. "Entertain me?" Julian smirked. "Vanguard is a shell," Elena said. The table went silent. Braden blinked, his glass halfway to his mouth. "Excuse me?" "You're buying into the hype of their new automated trucking fleet," Elena continued, turning her gaze to Braden. "But you didn't read the footnotes in their Q3 earnings report released yesterday afternoon, did you? Specifically page 42, subsection C." Julian's smirk faltered. He sat up straighter. "Vanguard's debt-to-equity ratio just hit 4.5. Elena recited the numbers as if she were reading them from a teleprompter. They are leveraging assets they don't own. Their proprietary automation software is currently being sued for patent infringement by a distinct subsidiary of Oracle in a Delaware court. A lawsuit that was unsealed 3 hours ago. If you dump $30 million into Vanguard at the opening bell, Mr. Cole, you will lose approximately 60% of it by lunch when the lawsuit hits the Bloomberg terminals. The silence at the table was deafening. It wasn't just quiet. It was the vacuum of space. Braden's face went purple. You don't know what you're talking about. You're a waitress." Elena ignored him and turned her attention to Julian. She leaned in slightly, invading his personal space. "And you, Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice dropping an octave. "You're currently holding a short position on Biogen limits, aren't you? You're betting on their FDA approval failing." Julian froze. His eyes widened, the blue ice cracking to reveal genuine shock. That position was confidential. It hadn't been disclosed to the street yet. "How?" Julian started, his voice rough. "It's a mistake," Elena interrupted. "The FDA approval is going through. The clinical trial data had a variance in the placebo group that looked like a failure, but it was a statistical anomaly caused by the demographic spread in the Kansas test center. Once they adjust for age, the efficacy is 98%. The announcement drops tomorrow at 9 a.m. If you don't cover your short position by the time the market opens, Thorne Capital is going to bleed $500 million. She reached down, picked up the $100 bill, and tucked it into Braden's suit pocket. "Keep your money," she said softly. "You're going to need it." Elena picked up her tray, turned on her heel, and walked away. For 10 seconds, nobody at the table breathed. Julian Thorne stared at the empty space where the waitress had stood. His heart was hammering against his ribs, a sensation he hadn't felt in years. He grabbed his tablet, his fingers flying across the screen, pulling up the raw data files for the Biogen trials, digging deep into the obscure appendices she had mentioned. "Julian?" Braden stammered. She's crazy, right? Just a crazy chick reading conspiracy forums? Julian didn't answer. He found the data. He ran the adjustment she suggested. His face drained of color. She was right. My God, Julian whispered. He stood up so abruptly his chair toppled over backward, crashing onto the floor. Julian? Where did she go? Julian barked, scanning the restaurant floor. Get the manager, now. He had asked for a joke. Instead, a waitress had just handed him the keys to the kingdom and saved him from financial ruin between serving rounds of drinks. And he didn't even know her name. Julian Thorne didn't run. Men like him didn't run. They strode with purpose. But as he navigated through the crowded tables of the gilded cage, there was a frantic energy in his step that terrified the staff. He cornered the manager, Mr. Henderson, near the kitchen doors. Henderson was sweating, wiping his forehead with a handkerchief. Mr. Thorne, I am so terribly sorry, Henderson babbled, wringing his hands. I saw her being rude. It's unacceptable. I've already fired her. She's packing her locker right now. I assure you, she will never work in this city again. You fired her? Julian's voice was a low growl. Yes, immediately. We have standards here, and— You idiot, Julian hissed. He grabbed Henderson by the lapels of his cheap suit, pulling him close. If you let her leave this building, I will buy this building, burn it to the ground, and ensure you are unhireable even as a janitor. Do you understand me? Henderson gasped, his eyes bulging. Yes. Yes, Mr. Thorne. What is her name? Elena. Elena Vance. Elena. The name rolled through Julian's mind. It sounded ordinary, yet the woman attached to it was anything but. Stay out of my way, Julian ordered, shoving the manager aside. He pushed through the swinging double doors into the kitchen. The kitchen was a chaotic symphony of shouting chefs, clanging pans, and steam. Julian ignored it all, marching toward the back where the staff lockers were located. He needed to find her. He needed to know how. How did a waitress know about the Kansas data variants? That information wasn't just obscure, it was practically non-existent to the public. Only someone with high-level clearance or a genius-level intellect for pattern recognition could have spotted it. He rounded the corner to the locker bay. It was empty. A single locker door swung open on rusty hinges. Inside, a discarded name tag read, Elena. Damn it! Julian slammed his fist against the metal. He ran to the service exit, bursting out into the cool night air of the alleyway. It was raining lightly, the NYC streets slick and reflecting the neon lights. He looked left, then right. Half a block down, he saw a figure in a worn beige trench coat walking briskly toward the subway station, clutching a broken umbrella. Elena! Julian shouted, his voice echoing off the brick walls. The figure didn't stop. She walked faster. Julian sprinted. He caught up to her just as she was swiping her Metro card at the turnstile of the 51st Street station. He reached over the barrier and grabbed her arm, gently this time, unlike Braden. Elena, wait. She spun around, her eyes flashing with defensive anger. Up close, without the dim lighting of the restaurant, he saw the exhaustion etched into her features. She wasn't wearing makeup. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun. She looked nothing like the polished corporate sharks he dealt with daily, yet she held herself with more dignity than all of them combined. Let go of me, she said, her voice sharp. I've been fired. You got what you wanted. You had your laugh. Leave me alone. I didn't fire you, Julian said, breathless. And I'm not laughing. Well, your friend Braden probably is. Forget Braden. Braden is a moron, Julian said intensely. You were right, about Biogen. I checked the data. Elena pulled her arm free, rubbing the spot where he had touched her. Of course I was right. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to go home and figure out how to pay my rent since I just lost my income." She pushed through the turnstile. "Wait!" Julian pulled a platinum credit card from his wallet. "I'll pay you. For your time. Just talk to me." Elena paused on the other side of the bars. She looked at the card, then up at him, with a look of utter disdain. "You think money fixes everything, don't you, Mr. Thorne? It usually does." "Not this," she said. "You want to know how I knew? Because I used to be you. Only better." Before Julian could process that, a subway train rumbled into the station below, the noise swallowing the air. "Who are you?" Julian asked, desperate. "Where did you work?" Elena hesitated. The train doors chimed below. "Ask Marcus Sterling," she said, her voice barely audible over the screech of the brakes. "Ask him about the ghost of Liberty Street." She turned and ran down the stairs. Julian stood frozen at the turnstile. Marcus Sterling. The name was like a splash of acid. Marcus Sterling was Julian's biggest rival, the CEO of Sterling Global, and a man known for his ruthlessness. They had been at war for market share for 5 years. And the ghost of Liberty Street? It was an urban legend on Wall Street. 5 years ago, there was a rumor of a quantitative analyst at Sterling Global who had built an algorithm so perfect it predicted the 2021 crash to the hour. But then the analyst vanished. No name, no trace. Rumor was they had been caught embezzling and fled the country. Julian pulled out his phone. His hands were shaking slightly. He dialed his head of security. "It's Thorne. I need a background check. Immediate. Priority Alpha." "Name, sir?" "Elena Vance. Cross-reference with Sterling Global and find out everything about an alias or nickname. The ghost of Liberty Street." He hung up and stared down into the dark subway tunnel. The waitress wasn't just a genius. She was a weapon. And if Marcus Sterling had thrown her away, Julian knew one thing for certain. He had to pick her up before anyone else realized she was on the market. The rain had turned into a torrential downpour by the time Julian's black armored Maybach pulled up to the curb in Queens. It was a neighborhood of peeling paint, barred windows, and flickering streetlights, a world away from the penthouse suites of Manhattan. "Are you sure this is the address, sir?" the driver asked, eyeing a group of teenagers on the corner nervously. "Wait here," Julian said. He grabbed a black umbrella and stepped out. His Italian leather shoes splashed into a puddle of oily water. He didn't care. He had spent the last 3 hours on the phone with private investigators, and what they had found was enough to make his blood run cold. Elena Vance wasn't just a waitress. 5 years ago, she was the youngest senior quantitative analyst in the history of Sterling Global. Then, overnight, she vanished. The official record said she was fired for gross misconduct and attempted embezzlement. But the whispers, the deep web rumors, said she had written an algorithm called the Oracle that could predict market volatility with 94% accuracy. Julian climbed the creaking stairs of the tenement building to apartment 4B. The hallway smelled of boiled cabbage and stale cigarettes. He knocked. No answer. He knocked again, harder. "Go away, landlord. I told you I'll have the rent on Tuesday." Elena's voice came through the wood, muffled and tired. "It's not the landlord, Elena." There was a long silence. Then, the sound of a chain sliding. The door opened a crack. Elena stood there, wrapped in an oversized grey sweater, her eyes red-rimmed. She looked smaller here, stripped of the waitress uniform and the anger she had worn like armor at the restaurant. "You," she said flatly. "How did you find me?" "I'm a billionaire, Elena. I can find anyone." Julian pushed the door open gently but firmly. "May I come in?" "No." "Get out." "Elena, who is it?" A weak, raspy voice called from the back room. Elena's expression shattered. She looked back over her shoulder, terrified. "It's no one, Dad. Just a wrong number." She turned back to Julian, hissing, "Please, leave. My father is sick. He can't handle stress." Julian looked past her into the small living room. It was spotless but sparse. On a side table, he saw a mountain of orange prescription bottles. Cardiomyopathy. He recognized the labels. His own grandfather had died of it. It was an expensive disease. "He needs surgery, doesn't he?" Julian asked softly. "The valve replacement. It costs about $200,000 out of pocket because your insurance won't cover the specialist." Elena's face went pale. "You have no right. I can pay for it," Julian said. "Tonight. I can have him transferred to Mount Sinai private ward within the hour. Best surgeons in the country." Elena gripped the doorframe, her knuckles white. She was trembling. "What do you want? Sex? Is that it? The rich guy wants to own the smart, poor girl?" "I want your brain," Julian said, his voice deadly serious. "I looked into Sterling. I know about the embezzlement charge." Elena laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "So you know I'm a criminal. Why are you here?" "Because you didn't do it." Julian stepped closer. "I ran the numbers on your embezzlement. The trades you were accused of making. They were clumsy, amateur. They lost money. But the algorithm you built, that was a masterpiece. Marcus Sterling framed you, didn't he? You found something he was doing illegal, and he crushed you before you could blow the whistle." Elena stopped breathing. For 5 years, no one had believed her. Not the police, not the SEC, not even her own lawyer. They all saw the evidence Sterling had planted. "He was laundering cartel money through shell companies in the Cayman Islands," Elena whispered, the secret spilling out after years of silence. "I saw the patterns in the dark pool trades. When I went to him, he smiled. The next day, my bank accounts were frozen, and the FBI was at my door. He told me if I ever spoke about it, he'd make sure my father didn't get his medicine." She looked up at Julian, tears finally spilling over. "He destroyed my life, Mr. Thorne. I wait tables because no financial firm will hire a thief. I'm a ghost." Julian felt a surge of rage he hadn't expected. He hated losing money, but he hated bullies more. And Marcus Sterling was the biggest bully in New York. "Come work for me," Julian said. "I can't. The background checks." "I am the background check," Julian interrupted. "I'm appointing you as a special independent consultant. Off the books for now. Your job is simple. Save my company from the biogen fallout, and then help me destroy Marcus Sterling." Elena wiped her face with her sleeve. "Destroy him. He's coming for me next. I know it. He's planning a hostile takeover of Thorne Capital. I need the Oracle. I need the ghost of Liberty Street." He held out his hand. "I'll pay for your father's surgery. I'll give you a $5 million bonus. And when we're done, I'll use my legal team to expose Sterling and clear your name for good." Elena looked at his hand. She looked at the cramped apartment that had been her prison. She thought of her father coughing in the next room, and she thought of Marcus Sterling's smug face when he ruined her. She didn't take his hand. She shook it. "I don't want $5 million, Elena said, her eyes turning into steel. "I want 10, and I want Marcus Sterling's corner office when we bankrupt him." Julian grinned. It was the first genuine smile he had shown in years. "Deal. Pack your bags, Miss Vance. You have work to do." Monday morning at Thorne Capital was usually a quiet affair, until Julian Thorne walked in with a woman nobody recognized. The trading floor, a cavernous space filled with 300 screaming analysts and glowing Bloomberg terminals, went silent as they passed. Elena was wearing a sharp navy pantsuit Julian had had delivered to her hotel room that morning. It was tailored to perfection, armor for the modern gladiator. Her hair was slicked back, her chin held high, but the whispers started immediately. "Who is that? Is that the waitress from the Gilded Cage? I saw a TikTok about her." "No way. Julian wouldn't bring a server to the war room." Julian led her straight to the executive conference room on the 50th floor. Inside, the inner circle was waiting. These were the sharks Elena had warned him about. There was Trent Davis, the head of analytics, a man who thought he was God's gift to mathematics because he went to MIT. There was Sarah Jenkins, the COO, sharp, cold and protective of her territory. And there was Braden Cole, who, despite his incompetence, was still on the board because his father owned 10% of the company. When Braden saw Elena, he choked on his coffee. "You have got to be kidding me," Braden sputtered. "Julian, this is a joke, right? You brought the help to a strategy meeting." Trent Davis leaned back, spinning a pen. "Julian, we have the SEC breathing down our necks about the Biogen shorts. We don't have time for your charity projects." Julian stood at the head of the table. "Everyone, shut up!" The room went quiet. "This is Elena Vance. She is my new senior strategy consultant. Anything she says comes directly from me. If you question her, you question me." "Consultant?" Trent scoffed. "Does she even have a license? Does she know what a derivative is?" Elena didn't wait for Julian to defend her. She walked to the whiteboard, picked up a marker, and uncapped it. "Trent, isn't it?" Elena asked, not looking at him. "I reviewed your risk model for the upcoming quarter this morning." "That's confidential data," Trent snapped. "How did you— You're betting heavily on the semiconductor shortage ending by Q3. Elena wrote a complex equation on the board in rapid-fire strokes. "You're using a linear regression model based on 2019 supply chain data." She turned around. "That's lazy, Trent. You forgot to account for the neon gas shortage coming out of Ukraine. Without neon, there are no lasers. Without lasers, there are no chips. Your model isn't just wrong. It's going to cost this company 12% of its liquidity in 6 weeks. Trent's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked at the math on the board. It was flawless. It was brilliant. It was math he hadn't seen since his doctoral thesis. "Who are you?" Sarah Jenkins asked, her eyes narrowing, calculating. "I'm the person who is going to save your bonuses," Elena said, capping the marker. She tossed it onto the mahogany table. It spun and stopped, pointing at Braden. "Now," Elena said, taking the seat at the opposite end of the table from Julian, the power position. "We have a problem. Julian's short position on Biogen is covered, thanks to the tip I gave him on Friday. We lost nothing, but the market smells blood. They think Thorn Capital is unstable. So we issue a press release," Braden suggested. "No," Elena said. "We go on the offensive. We buy Biogen." The room exploded. "Buy them!" Trent yelled. "Are you insane? We were shorting them on Friday. If we buy them now, it looks like market manipulation." "It looks like a pivot," Elena corrected calmly. "The FDA approval is real. The stock is going to triple. If we acquire a controlling stake before the market closes today, we ride the wave up. We turn a near-miss disaster into the most aggressive acquisition of the year. It shows strength. It shows Julian Thorne isn't afraid." She looked at Julian. "Do you trust me?" It was the question that hung in the air. This was a billion-dollar gamble. If she was wrong, if the FDA approval snagged, if the SEC investigated, Thorn Capital would be deleted. Julian looked at Elena. He saw the fire in her eyes. He remembered the rain in Queens. He remembered the ghost of Liberty Street. "Do it," Julian said. "Julian!" Trent stood up. You can't listen to her. She's a nobody. I said, do it, Julian roared, slamming his hand on the table. Trent, execute the buy order. Leverage our cash reserves. All of it. If this goes south, Trent hissed, typing furiously on his laptop, I'm testifying against you. If this goes south, Elena said coolly, I'll go back to waiting tables. But you, Trent, you'll be unhireable. For the next 6 hours, the room was a war zone. Elena directed the trades like a conductor. She anticipated market fluctuations before they appeared on the screen. She knew exactly when the high-frequency trading bots would kick in and how to bypass them. At 3:55 p.m., 5 minutes before the closing bell, the news broke. Biogen announces FDA approval for groundbreaking heart medication. Stock surges 200%. We're up, Sarah Jenkins whispered, staring at the screen. My God, we're up $300 million. The room erupted. Analysts were high-fiving. Even Trent looked stunned, staring at Elena with a mixture of hatred and respect. Julian didn't cheer. He watched Elena. She didn't smile. She just let out a long, slow breath and leaned back in her chair. She had done it. She had proved she belonged. Julian walked over to her. The adrenaline was pumping through his veins. He wanted to hug her, to shake her, to kiss her. He didn't know which. You were incredible, he said, his voice low so only she could hear. I was doing my job, Elena said, though a small smile touched her lips. Suddenly, the heavy double doors of the conference room swung open. A team of lawyers in grey suits marched in. Behind them walked a man who sucked the oxygen out of the room. He was in his 50s, with silver hair and a smile that looked like a jagged wound. Marcus Sterling. The room went dead silent. Julian, my boy, Sterling boomed, spreading his arms. Excellent work on Biogen. Truly inspiring. Julian stepped in front of Elena, shielding her instinctively. What are you doing here, Marcus? You don't have an appointment. I don't need one, Sterling grinned. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a document. As of 10 minutes ago, Sterling Global acquired a 15% stake in Thorn Capital from your silent partners. Added to what I already own, that makes me the majority shareholder. Elena stood up slowly, her blood turning to ice. I'm calling an emergency board meeting for Friday, Sterling said, his eyes scanning the room until they landed on Elena. His smile widened. It was the look of a predator, spotting wounded prey. And I see you've found my old employee, Sterling said, his voice dripping with venom. Hello, Elena. I hope you haven't been giving Julian any illegal advice. We wouldn't want history to repeat itself, would we? He tossed the document on the table. Enjoy your victory, Julian. By Friday, this will be my company, and you'll be the one serving drinks. Sterling turned and walked out, his lawyers trailing him like a pack of wolves. Julian stared at the door. He had won the battle, but the war had just walked through his front door. He turned to Elena. She looked like she had seen a ghost. He can't do that, Julian said. 15%? Who sold to him? Elena looked at the table, her mind racing. Someone in this room, she whispered. Someone here gave him the inside track on your silent partners. You have a traitor, Julian. She scanned the faces of the executives. Trent looked confused. Sarah looked angry. But Braden Cole? Braden was staring at his phone, refusing to look up. And in that moment, Elena knew. The game had just become deadly. The silence in the executive suite following Marcus Sterling's departure was heavy, suffocating. The air conditioner hummed, but the room felt stiflingly hot. Everyone out, Julian said, his voice terrifyingly calm. Go home. Do not speak to the press. Do not answer your phones. If I see a quote from any of you in the Wall Street Journal tomorrow, I will sue you into the Stone Age. The executives scrambled for the exits like rats fleeing a sinking ship. Braden Cole lingered for a split second, his eyes darting to Julian, then to Elena, before he shoved his phone into his pocket and hurried out. When the door clicked shut, Julian slumped into his chair, rubbing his temples. The invincible CEO looked suddenly human. "He has the votes," Julian said, staring at the polished mahogany table. "If Sterling has 15% plus his own holdings and he flips the board, I'm out on Friday. My father built this company from a garage in Brooklyn, and I'm going to lose it in 72 hours. Elena walked over to the window, looking out at the sprawling Manhattan skyline. The city lights looked like diamonds, cold, hard, and indifferent. "You're not going to lose it," Elena said. "Did you hear him? He has inside information. He knows our weak points. We have a mole, Elena, and until we find them, every move we make, Sterling will know it 5 minutes later." Elena turned, her silhouette framed against the city. "Then we don't find the mole, Julian. We use him." Julian looked up. "What?" "It's called a canary trap," Elena said, her mind shifting into the cold, calculated gears of the ghost. "We suspect Braden, right? But we can't prove it, and if we fire him now without proof, his father will sue and trigger a shareholder revolt before Friday. So what do? "We feed him a lie," Elena said, walking back to the table. "Tonight we are going to issue 3 different confidential memos to 3 different suspects. To Sarah Jenkins, we say we are planning to sell the Asian tech division. To Trent, we say we are filing for bankruptcy protection. And to Braden," she smiled, a dangerous curve of her lips. "To Braden, we say we have found a poison pill, a hidden clause in your father's original charter that prevents a hostile takeover if the stock price drops below a certain threshold." "There is no such clause," Julian said, frowning. "I know. But Sterling doesn't. If Sterling mentions a poison pill or tries to artificially inflate the stock price to counter it, we know Braden is the leak, and more importantly, we control what Sterling does next." They relocated to Julian's penthouse on the Upper East Side. It was safer than the office. No bugs, no prying eyes. The apartment was a fortress of glass and steel overlooking Central Park. For the next 10 hours they worked. It was an intimate war room. Pizza boxes were stacked on the $10,000 coffee table. Julian had discarded his jacket and tie. Elena had kicked off her heels and was curled up on the sofa with a laptop. The dynamic between them shifted as the night wore on. The billionaire and the waitress faded away. They were just 2 brilliant minds, perfectly in sync. "You know," Julian said around 2:00 a.m., pouring 2 glasses of red wine, "I checked on your father. My team at Mount Sinai says the surgery is scheduled for tomorrow morning. He's stable." Elena stopped typing. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She didn't look up, afraid that if she did, she might cry. "Thank you. I don't know how to repay you. You're saving my company. I think we're even." Julian walked over and handed her the glass. He sat down next to her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something like cedar and rain. "Why did you really help me?" Elena asked, finally looking at him. "At the restaurant, you didn't have to listen to me. You could have just laughed like the rest of them." Julian took a sip of wine, his eyes searching hers. "Because when you looked at me, you didn't see a bank account. You saw a challenge. Everyone around me. Braden, Sarah, the board. They tell me what I want to hear. You told me the truth. That's worth more than a stock tip." The air between them crackled with electricity. It wasn't just gratitude. It was recognition. 2 lonely people who lived in a world of numbers, finding someone who spoke the same language. Julian leaned in slightly. Elena's breath hitched. She found herself leaning in too, drawn to his intensity. Buzz. Elena's phone vibrated on the table, shattering the moment. She pulled back, flushing. She grabbed the phone. It was a text from an automated server she had set up. Alert. Encrypted packet intercepted. Source. B. Cole. Elena's eyes went cold. The romance evaporated, replaced by the soldier. "We got him," she whispered. "Braden just sent an encrypted email to a server linked to Sterling Global." Julian's jaw tightened. What did he say? He told Sterling about the poison pill. He told him that if the stock drops, the takeover fails. Julian stood up, pacing the room like a caged tiger. "That bastard! I've known Braden since prep school. I'm going to kill him." "No," Elena said, standing up and grabbing his arm. "You're not going to touch him. We need him to feel safe. We need Sterling to believe the lie." "Why?" "Because," Elena said, her eyes gleaming with a strategy that was bordering on diabolical. "If Sterling thinks dropping the stock price will trigger a defense mechanism, he's going to spend the next 2 days buying everything he can to keep the price up. He's going to over-leverage himself. He's going to drain his cash reserves to artificially inflate Thorn capital." Julian realized what she was saying. A slow, incredulous smile spread across his face. "He's going to bankrupt himself trying to buy a company he thinks is protected," Julian said. "Exactly," Elena nodded. "And when the board meeting happens on Friday, when he's fully extended, with no cash left, we pull the rug out." Julian looked at her with pure awe. "You are dangerous, Elena Vance." "I told you," she said, picking up her wine glass. "I used to be you. Only better." Friday arrived with a sky the color of bruised iron. The atmosphere inside the Thorn Capital boardroom was electric. 50 people were crammed into the room. Board members, major shareholders, lawyers, and the press. At the head of the table sat Marcus Sterling. He looked triumphant, leaning back in Julian's chair as if he already owned it. Braden Cole sat to his right, looking smug and avoiding Julian's gaze. Julian sat at the side, looking tired, defeated. He wore a simple black suit, his head bowed. To the onlookers he looked like a man preparing for his execution. Elena was nowhere to be seen. "Shall we begin?" Sterling announced, his voice booming. "We are here to vote on Motion 24B, a vote of no confidence in the current CEO, Julian Thorn, and the immediate restructuring of the company under Sterling Global Management." "Seconded," Braden Cole said quickly. "Julian," Sterling said, flashing a shark-like grin. "Do you have any final words before we strip you of your legacy? Perhaps another joke from your waitress?" The room tittered nervously. Julian slowly stood up. He buttoned his jacket. He looked at Braden, then at Sterling. "Actually, Marcus," Julian said, his voice steady, "I do have a few words, but they aren't mine." Julian pressed a button on the console in front of him. The massive screens covering the north wall flickered to life. But instead of a PowerPoint presentation, the screens went black. Then, a single line of green text appeared. "Accessing archive. Ghost of Liberty Street. Decryption. Key. Vengeance." The double doors at the back of the room swung open. Elena Vance walked in. She wasn't wearing a waitress uniform. She wasn't wearing the borrowed suit. She was wearing a white bespoke dress that made her look like an avenging angel. She carried a slim silver laptop. "You asked for the waitress, Marcus," Elena said, her voice projecting clearly across the silent room. "Here I am." Sterling laughed, though it sounded strained. "This is pathetic, Julian. Bringing your mistress to beg for mercy?" Elena ignored him. She walked to the podium, plugged in her laptop, and looked at the board members. "Ladies and gentlemen of the board," Elena said, "you are being asked to vote for a merger with Sterling Global. You are being told that Sterling Global is a solvent, powerful partner. That is a lie. Get her out of here, Sterling shouted, standing up. Security. Sit down, Marcus, Julian barked. The command was so forceful that Sterling actually hesitated. 5 years ago, Elena continued, typing a command. Marcus Sterling framed an analyst for embezzlement to cover his own crimes. That analyst was me. I spent 5 years in the shadows, waiting, watching, and keeping a backdoor key to his servers. On the giant screen, documents began to scroll. Not just spreadsheets, emails, chats, bank transfers. These are wire transfers from the last 48 hours, Elena narrated. Sterling has been aggressively buying Thorn Capital stock to prevent a poison pill defense. A defense that doesn't exist. The room gasped. He has drained Sterling Global's liquidity to zero, Elena said. He has leveraged his own company's assets to buy yours at an inflated price. He is currently exposed to the tune of $4 billion. Sterling's face turned purple. He lunged toward Braden. You said there was a poison pill. You swore it. Braden shrank back, terrified. She sent the memo. It looked real. And here is the interesting part, Elena said, her fingers flying across the keys. Because Sterling Global is now technically insolvent, their automated trading algorithms are about to trigger a liquidation sale to cover their margin calls. No, Sterling whispered. Stop, you can't. I built your algorithms, Marcus, Elena said coldly. I know exactly where the kill switch is, and I know exactly how to trigger it. She hit enter. The screen split. On the left was the live feed of Sterling Global's stock price. It was at $140 a share, then $135, then $110, then $80. It was a free fall, a red line plummeting straight down. Phones in the room started ringing wildly. The board members were checking their tablets, shouting orders to their brokers. My stock! Sterling screamed, watching his net worth evaporate in seconds. Stop it! Stop the program! I can't, Elena said calmly. It's a cascading failure. You over-leveraged yourself based on false insider information provided by Braden Cole. That is illegal, by the way. Corporate espionage, market manipulation. She pointed to the screen where a new window popped up. A video file. It was grainy footage from a hidden camera in Julian's office, which Elena had installed, with Julian's permission, the night before. It showed Braden Cole photographing confidential documents. That's a felony, Braden, Julian said from his seat. Braden put his head in his hands and sobbed. Sterling looked around the room. His empire was crumbling in real time. The board members were looking at him, not with respect, but with horror. You bitch, Sterling hissed, advancing on Elena. I'll kill you. He rushed the podium. Julian was over the table in a second. He tackled Sterling mid-stride, slamming him into the carpet. Security guards burst into the room, pulling the two men apart. Julian stood up, adjusting his cuffs. He looked down at Sterling, who was panting, red-faced and ruined. Get him out of my building, Julian said, and call the FBI. I think they'll be very interested in the Cayman accounts Ms. Vance just uploaded to their tip line. As the guards dragged a screaming Marcus Sterling and a weeping Braden Cole out of the room, silence returned. The stock chart on the screen had bottomed out. Sterling Global was penny stock. Thorn Capital, however, was untouched. Julian turned to the stunned board members. The motion on the table is a vote of no confidence, Julian said. All in favor? Not a single hand went up. All opposed? Every hand raised. Motion denied, Julian said. He turned to Elena, who was unplugging her laptop, her hands trembling slightly now that the adrenaline was fading. The room erupted into applause. It started slow, then grew into a roar. The sharks of Wall Street were standing up, clapping for the waitress. Julian walked over to her. He didn't care about the board. He didn't care about the cameras. He took her face in his hands. "You did it," he whispered. "We did it," she corrected. "No." Julian smiled, his eyes soft. "You. It was always you." And right there, in front of the entire board of directors, the billionaire CEO kissed the genius waitress. It wasn't a show, it was a promise. 3 weeks had passed since the boardroom massacre, but the tremors were still being felt across Wall Street. The collapse of Sterling Global was the biggest financial news of the decade. Marcus Sterling was currently under house arrest in his Hamptons estate, wearing an ankle monitor, while the FBI dismantled his offshore accounts one by one. Braden Cole had fled to Europe, disgraced and cut off from his family fortune. But inside Thorn Capital, it was business as usual. Or rather, business was better than ever. The stock was up 40% following the Biogen acquisition and the public defeat of the hostile takeover. Julian Thorn stood in his office, looking out at the city. It was raining again, just like the night he found her. But this time, the city felt different. It felt conquerable. There was a knock on the door. "Come in." Elena walked in. She wasn't wearing the waitress uniform, and she wasn't wearing the war paint suit from the boardroom. She wore a soft cream cashmere coat and jeans. She looked rested. She looked happy. "I have the final paperwork for your consultancy fee," Julian said, gesturing to the papers on his desk. $10 million, as agreed, plus a bonus for saving my life. Elena picked up the check. She looked at the number. It was enough to change her life forever. It was enough to buy a house, travel the world, and never work another day. "Thank you, Julian," she said softly. "My father's surgery was a complete success. He's coming home tomorrow. I owe you that." "You don't owe me anything," Julian said, walking around the desk. He stopped a few feet from her, the magnetic pull between them still as strong as that night in the penthouse. "Stay." Elena looked up, surprised. "Stay?" "I don't mean stay for the money," Julian said, his voice vulnerable for the first time. "I mean stay here, with me, as a partner, as whatever you want to be. I can't imagine running this place without you anymore. The office feels empty when you're not in it." He reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear. "We make a good team, Elena. The billionaire and the ghost. We could rule this city." Elena leaned into his touch for a moment, closing her eyes. It would be so easy to say yes, to step into his world, to be the power behind the throne, to be loved by the most eligible bachelor in New York. But she opened her eyes and stepped back. "I can't," she said. Julian looked stunned. "Why? Is it because of what happened with Sterling? I promise I would never—" "No, Julian, it's not that." She smiled, a sad but proud smile. "It's because for 5 years I was defined by men like Sterling. I was the victim. Then for the last 3 weeks, I was defined by you. I was Julian Thorne's secret weapon. I was the waitress you saved." She folded the check and put it in her pocket. "I need to know who I am when I'm not fighting a war," she said. "I need to build something that is mine, not Sterling's, not Thorne's, mine." Julian stared at her. He saw the resolve in her eyes, the same steel that had stared down a boardroom of 50 angry men, and he realized he had fallen in love with her precisely because she couldn't be owned. "So, this is it?" Julian asked, his throat tight. "Goodbye?" "Not goodbye," Elena said, walking to the door. She paused and looked back, a mischievous glint in her eye. "But if you ever need investment advice, my hourly rate just went up." 6 months later, the Obsidian Lounge was the new it spot in Manhattan. It was darker, sleeker, and even more exclusive than the Gilded Cage. Julian Thorne walked in, flanked by his security. The room hushed as he entered. He was the king of Wall Street, after all. He was led to the best table in the house, the one by the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the harbour. But the table was already occupied. A woman sat there. She was typing on a tablet, sipping sparkling water. She wore a tailored black blazer that screamed power. "I believe you're in my seat," Julian said, smiling as he approached. Elena Vance looked up. She didn't stand. She didn't bow. She simply gestured to the empty chair opposite her. "I bought the building, Julian," she said with a smirk. "Technically all the seats are mine." Julian laughed, a loud, genuine laugh that turned heads. He sat down. "I heard the rumors," Julian said. "Vance and Associates, a boutique quantitative hedge fund. You posted a 300% return in your first quarter. You're poaching my best analysts." "I only take the smart ones," Elena replied, locking her tablet. "Trent tried to apply. I sent his resume to the shredder." "Good." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. The dynamic completely shifted. They were no longer savior and victim. They were titans, equals. "So," Julian said, leaning forward, "since you own the building, can I buy you a drink, or is that against company policy?" Elena looked at him. The chess game was over. The wars were won. All that was left was the man and the woman. "You can buy me a drink," Elena said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "But just so you know, I'm still not giving you any stock tips for free." "I don't want tips," Julian said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "I just want you." Elena squeezed his hand back. "That," she smiled, "is the best investment you'll ever make." As the waiter approached, a young, nervous man with a tray, Elena looked at him with kindness. "Take your time," she told the waiter gently. "We aren't going anywhere." She knew better than anyone that the person serving the drinks might just be the most powerful person in the room. What a journey. From being humiliated over $100 bill to owning the very building where she was once invisible, Elena proved that true power isn't about the money in your pocket. It's about the brilliance in your mind. Julian thought he was just playing a game, but he ended up finding the only woman who could checkmate him. Did you see that twist coming with the poison pill trap? I loved how she used Braden's own greed against him. If you enjoyed this story of karma, romance, and high-stakes revenge, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story. I want to know, would you have taken the job with Julian or started your own company like Elena? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching.